Hey, coach, do you have a clear sense of what it's like to have an intuitive hit? Or are you not so sure? I believe intuition is one of the most valuable coaching skills we can cultivate, but it's often a skill that just isn't talked about in the coaching space. I'm Kendall. Tune in to today's episode where I'm going to share with you my secrets to not only accessing your intuition, but how I use it in my coaching and how I bring it up with my clients, even with the ones who are not so woo. I can't imagine trying to coach without using my intuition. And if you want to create a closer connection to yours and use it as a coaching skill, this episode is for you. It's all here for you in this episode of the Money Coach School podcast. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Money Coach School podcast. To really excel at coaching women, you have to be skilled, confident, and even fearless at money coaching. If you're passionate about women holding genuine money power and love supporting women entrepreneurs, then this is the show for you. Now here's your host, money feminist Kendall Summerhawk.
Hello, beautiful coach. I am so happy to be here with you today. For the past 2 weeks or so, I have been knee deep in recreating my core signature coach training, the Courageous Coaching Method, which is so exciting because I have been wanting to remake it for the past couple of years, and now I am. Recreating it means rewriting, refilming, up-leveling how I teach how to coach, adding in tons of what we call the coaching skills power pack, more demos, all of the good things. And we're going live with access to the training at the end of this month. And we already have dozens of people who got in during the pre-sale I ran earlier in the month. And if you missed that, that's okay because Courageous Coaching is still at early bird tuition. And you can check that out with the link I'll put in the show notes, or you can also go to kendallsummerhawk.com/CC, which stands for Courageous Coaching. I am already so proud and so excited about this new version, really what I would call it the 2.0 version of Courageous Coaching, because this is the first time we've ever offered Courageous Coaching certification separate from my other certifications. So this feels amazing. And Courageous Coaching certification fills a real need in the coaching space, which is how to unlock deep, lasting results in coaching women, which results in boosting your income and impact. The other need this fulfills is the demand for a coach training of the highest quality that can be completed in just a few weeks versus months and at a tuition that is budget friendly. The women enrolling in Courageous Coaching certification have already told us they want a direct path to learning how to powerfully coach without taking months and months and months to get certified. In this particular training of mine, you can get certified in just a few short weeks. And the other reason I'm so excited about it is it's really a great training. And what I mean is the lessons are short, they're simple to go through, they're clear, there are tons of examples. I love knowing that I am putting something out into the world that is of this high quality. It feels really, really good. So that's a little bit about what's going on in my world. And again, you can check out Courageous Coaching certification. You can check that out now at the early bird tuition at kendallsummerhawk.com/CC. And I will also put a link to it in the show notes. All right, so let's talk about you and accessing your connection to intuition in your coaching. If you plan on coaching women, then incorporating your innate intuitive abilities into your coaching, to me, this is not a maybe, it's a must. Those intuitive hits that you get, they're real and they matter. I believe that the very essence of our femininity is our ability to access divine downloads. And when properly used, incorporating your intuition into your coaching definitely can give you a strategic advantage that helps you stand out and attract high-end women entrepreneur clients. I've made millions in my coaching business by openly claiming and using my intuition. And yes, it's a little woo, but even my non-woo clients understand intuition and they absolutely love it when I'm using my intuition to help lead and guide where we take our coaching together. So for me, I consider my intuition every bit as important of a skill as any of the other coaching skills that I utilize. But here's the thing. It's not like I'm sitting there in a coaching session looking at a crystal ball and seeing the future for my client. That would be silly and just not practical. And I am both highly intuitive and highly practical. So, what I'm going to do here with you in this episode is walk you through 4 guidelines that will clarify for you what your intuition is, how to recognize it for yourself so you can access and strengthen this important part of your coaching skill set. And I'm going to share with you how to talk about it in a way that sounds credible to clients. And what I'm talking about here is just my viewpoint or way of looking at intuition. I'm sure there are many other ways to talk about intuition, but today I want to get you started simply and easily. All right, guideline number 1. Intuition is guidance. It's not psychic or predictive. So you're using it to guide you where to take your client during a coaching session. I also use it to guide me into possible new directions a client can explore. Women entrepreneurs are being challenged in their leadership. They're being challenged to take risks. They're challenged to do things they've never done before, and they benefit from your intuitive guidance as much as benefiting from a structured plan. Of course, I'm talking here about coaching women entrepreneurs by default because, as you know, I say it in almost every podcast episode. I think women entrepreneurs are the best niche on the planet. But really, any woman that you're coaching benefits from your intuitive guidance just as much as from a structured plan. So if my intuition is bringing something up for me, I bring it up for my client in the coaching session. I don't bring it up by saying something like, oh, my intuition is telling me such and such, because that is sounding predictive and it's not coaching. And I'll cover in a moment how I do bring it up. So the other way I use my intuition in a coaching session is to help see below the surface of what a client is challenged with. And this is incredibly important for me because I am a coach who excels at always looking for the deeper meaning of whatever it is that we're coaching on. My belief is that if we uncover the deeper meaning, or if we create a deeper meaning, then the actions and the results that a client wants, they're going to come so much easier and more clearly. All right, guideline number 2, learning how to recognize your intuition and be able to create it almost at will anytime is a skill you can develop. So I can only speak for myself. My intuition speaks to me in feelings and in images, and it's pretty much in that order. So for me, it's a feeling of being gently pulled, and it is really, really gentle. It's like a very, very whisper soft tug that I feel I would say in my body. I feel it in the area of my solar plexus or even lower, almost in my gut. So that feeling always comes first, and then I get an image or an impression. But here again, it's very soft. It's usually vague. It's not very distinct. And that's okay. I've learned to trust that feeling, to trust that image, and explore it with my client. The power is in the exploration. So I'm curious what the signals are for you when your intuition is speaking. If you start with the belief that, yes, you have intuition, which you do, then you can start to get quiet and notice what it sounds like, or what does it feel like, or what it looks like when you have that intuitive hit or hunch. One of the ways that you can teach yourself how to switch it on is this, and this works phenomenally well. So what I do is I get curious about what it might feel like to be my client just for a moment. And then I ask myself, what would I be feeling if I were them? Or what would that be like if I were them? Or what would I be thinking if I were them? So in other words, I'm stepping into their shoes for a moment. I feel what needs to be felt, or I see what needs to be seen as them. That technique is going to open up a huge amount of information for you. And I really feel like this is where my intuition gets activated and is also best utilized. And then whatever thoughts come up for me about if I were in their shoes, I would feel or I would see, then I check it out with them. By the way, this is not from my head. This is like really feeling that I'm stepping into their shoes. And in the early days of my coaching, I would literally stand up and step forward as if I was stepping into their shoes, into their space. That's when you're going to access all kinds of juicy information. Guideline number 3, it's not about being right. This is where you have to let go of your ego about your intuition being accurate or right. That's just not part of the equation. Your intuition is there as a guide, as a quiet trail guide, as a tool. It's not ego-driven about being right or not. So think of it as a supportive skill. And when talking about it with your client, be mindful not to use language that puts your client in the very unwelcome position of acknowledging whether you're right or not. Because your coaching, it's not about you. It's always about your client. Guideline number 4, language to use. All right, so I promised I would share with you how I bring this up with my clients. So I keep my language really low key when talking about intuition. So depending on my client, I'll say things like, I have a hunch, or I have an inkling, or even I have a suspicion. Or if it's a particularly woo client and we have that relationship, I may very well, in that case, go ahead and say, my intuition is telling me. Now, you can also use phrases like gut feel or intuitive hit. And if you really want to downplay it, you can just say something that comes to mind is. Now, you and I both know it isn't coming to mind. It's coming to heart, soul, and body, right? But the language of it is something that comes to mind is. So I would use that with a client who's more formal, less woo, just where it's going to be more acceptable to speak like that. So that's a bunch of different ways that you can present it. I typically say I have a hunch or I have an inkling. Now, there are plenty of times when I don't always say it's my intuition. I just use it without having to name it. For example, let's say my client is uncertain about something in her business. I could guess and ask from that place, which isn't very fun, or I can connect to my intuition and use it to inform my questions. For example, let's say my client knows they need to be making videos, but they're afraid. So my intuition may be that they're afraid to be seen. So I can use that to inform my questions. And my questions might be something like, I'm wondering if perhaps, are you afraid of being seen? And if they say, yeah, something agreeing with that, that's great. Then I'm going to run with that in the coaching. So from there, I may ask, are you afraid that it's not safe to be seen? And you can hear how soft and explorative my language is. I'm using my intuition. I'm using that technique of stepping into their shoes. I'm just not calling it out. I'm not calling attention to it. I'm just doing it. And there are times when I get a really strong intuition hit that is so positive about my client, and I know my client well. So I just come out and I say, I have an intuitive hit that you're going to love whatever it is. Okay? So that's different ways of using it, some that are very obvious and straightforward, and other ways that are more subtle, a little under the radar. So the takeaway here is this. Number 1, intuition is how you take coaching women into the soul level, not just the mechanics. Number 2, intuition is not necessarily psychic or predictive. It's really a form of emotional intelligence, and anyone can have access to it. Number 3, intuition is a skill you can master by practicing and using it, and what I call finding the feeling or finding the experience of it. And once you know how to recognize it for yourself, you can then start to master being able to access it almost at will at any time using the technique that I shared earlier. And number 4, you can be as open about it as you desire, or you can just use it with your clients without claiming and naming it. But I will tell you that women love it, even women in more traditional settings like in corporate. All right, that was fun to share with you. And I have a hunch that you found this episode to be permission giving for yourself to open up to your intuition because it's there for you. So access it, use it, have fun with it. All right. Thank you for listening and thank you for your loyalty. Definitely drop me an email at podcast@kendallsummerhawk.com. Ask me any questions that you want me to answer here on the podcast about money, about pricing, and certainly about coaching, because I am always here for you. All right. I'll see you next week in our next episode. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Money Coach School podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you follow so you never miss an episode. Also, I would so love and appreciate if you would leave a 5-star review. Your review supports women just like you in discovering all of the juicy tips and insights I'm sharing here on how to coach women on money. And if you want to learn how to excel at coaching women on money, definitely go to kendallsummerhawk.com and check out the wealth of money coach trainings that we have for you. Thanks so much for being part of this money coaching movement and for tuning into the show every week.